would have it.
Right, all right.
All right. Week 12 emergency recording as with Thanksgiving this week. Three Thanksgiving games tomorrow. And I think we were very interested in potentially picking one or two, or if not all three of the games tomorrow as part of our five selections this week. So we got to get the picks in by 4 o'clock Pacific. So we're doing an emergency recording. Talk through the game, see what we got.
Yeah, and I think most importantly, I feel like there was maybe some urgency to get on here because of the week that we're coming off of, and I think it was no coincidence, like I said to you over text, that our worst week came in the week where we just had to do everything over text. But yeah, I mean that was also just something where we couldn't control it. I mean, especially with the quick turnaround, right? We get the picks on Wednesday. I was
Yeah.
out, on the road on by Friday, so there really just wasn't much time for us to really get everything in. But I think it's good to just get back on here and even in this short call that we're gonna have because you got to get out. I think at least being able to bounce things off in real time instead of sending an analysis and then waiting for a response back or something.
Yeah, I agree. So speaking of that, real quick, 0-3, 0-4-1 last week.
Yep.
By far our worst week of the season. And frankly, like not even close on some of those games.
Yeah, and I mean we were really sweating out that push even. Like that was not yeah, that was not even like a back door or anything. Like that was like we gotta hope that they just hold on for the field goal here.
yeah,
And that's all that we get.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, frustrating, but I mean, as I always say with this contest, like, you know, obviously it's easier said than done, but you're always just a 5-0 week from getting right back in the thing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like golf. You're always just one great shot out, from getting back in the hole. So let's get into it. We'll start with the Thanksgiving Day games. First game, we got the Bills and the Lions. Bills are traveling back to Detroit on a short week, and they're laying 9.5 against the Lions, who are at home.
Yeah, so my initial lean came after you had pointed out that whole thing with their travel schedule where I was really looking at the Lions, right? We had just seen the Lions go into New York and, kind of a little bit of a surprise win over the Giants there. Especially with the reason that I liked the Giants so much last week was because Goff is historically so horrendous on the road. But
Yeah,
I think this is, I think the Lions, they definitely are gaining momentum, and I bet they're under for the win total this year, and they're definitely making it closer than I had anticipated.
yeah,
And they're a tough team, right? We've seen them be able to go ahead and play against the spread and everything. So my initial lean was to the Lions, but then I started thinking about it a little bit, and I think that my concern against Buffalo last week was in the past couple weeks has been with Allen's elbow. I
yeah,
think the elbow's okay. So, I'm gonna stop including that in my analysis and trying to, doubt that. And if we start to see the elbow kind of flare up later in the season, then that's something that we can play on. But right now, I don't really think it's affecting him how much. I mean, his stats really weren't great last week. But he's still able to move the ball, he's still able to get the ball in the end zone, all that stuff. And they ended up,
yeah,
having a good game against Cleveland. The big thing though is like the Bills, they feel like a Thanksgiving team, right? There are those pictures of Josh Allen and Dawson Knox eating the turkey leg and all that stuff. And I think that they're a team that, they kind of got like that Buffalo Northern redneck in them. I think that they like winning on Thanksgiving and they like having those moments and they like getting the memes out of it and stuff like that. So I think that they're able to get up for these types of games. I'm actually curious. I wish this was something I had thought of earlier. I would have looked it up. I wonder how home teams typically do fare on Thanksgiving, just because they're the ones that are actually dealing with distractions, whether
yeah.
it's waiting for a dinner before or after, any of that stuff. So I am curious how home teams actually do end up playing on Thanksgiving Day. But, the Bills, they played, looks like Josh Allen's played twice on Thanksgiving. They won 26-15 against Dallas. In 2019, they won 31-6 against New Orleans last year. The Lions, they've lost 14 of the last 18 on Thanksgiving, including the last 5. Like I had started to say, I do think that this is kind of a shift in the Lions teams that we've seen in recent years. So if they were to buck the trend, it wouldn't shock me if this team did it. But inside that 10, I actually like the Bills here.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I had you know, I was looking at, I think a lot of the same positive trends for the Lions that you were referencing. The Bills, couple chaotic weeks, the snowstorm traveled to Detroit on the short notice. They go back home. Now they're coming back out. Bills are, to your point, I mean, yeah, I think Josh Allen's like the the elbow's not the elbow's not like Stafford bad,
Yeah, and he did not play like great Josh Allen level last
Yeah,
week
yeah,
either. I think he had like 12 fantasy points, and I don't know
yeah.
exactly what his stats were, but they
But
couldn't have been that
I think it's worth noting the Bills are 0-3-1 against the spread in their last four.
good.
Josh Allen is 6-6-1 on short rest generally in his career. Yes, he's been really, really good on Thanksgiving. Although again, like, I think there are some extenuating circumstances here that just add variables on top of that. A couple other stats I saw: TD favorites or more, 12, 23-1 this season against the spread. Home dogs are 6-0. Again, when the line is a TD or more.
Yeah.
Um, we talk a lot about home dogs. And I think generally we've kind of looked in that direction. Um, so I don't know. I actually lean the Lions here. I think um I again I love the positive momentum. Um, even like I sent you that video of like, Dan Campbell in the locker room after the game, and then, just seeing the guys coming together after that. Like, I think they do believe that they are finally moving in the right direction. They're building something. Um, and I also just think like if anything, this screams backdoor. Like I don't see the Lions getting blown out to the point where they can't even backdoor cover.
Mhm.
If anything, I see them within striking distance to cover the spread, and I think they're a team, obviously, like, at home, they're not gonna mail it in. They're gonna play all 60 minutes. And so even if they're outside the number coming down the stretch, I think in some ways, like the Browns last week, I like them to cover. I like them with the 9.5.
Yeah, and I get all the arguments for the Lions, and like I said, that was my lean to start.
Yeah.
I think it was just one of those things where all of a sudden I'm like, maybe this is one of those games where the trends really just don't matter, and it's just like kind of like a reset game, and we look back and like I said, if anything, it was more just a gut feeling with Josh Allen, and like I said, I know that Buffalo and him in particular, they love the memes and they love all the posts, and I could just see this being one. But and I do worry, with such a big spread, these are two teams that are capable of just turning it into a shootout.
Yep.
So if it is just a back and forth, kind of up and down the field, high scoring game, then that's obviously not favorable for a 9.5 point spread. But
I think,
Buffalo, they do have Matt Milano back. They're starting to get some of those defensive guys back. I know that was the big
yeah.
problem that we had kind of identified when they were starting to not cover these spreads. And I think that's what you were saying, right? They haven't been covering the spread lately, but that was without guys like Milano missing, with them missing on defense, and these guys are coming back. They do still have some injuries, but I think Milano is kind of like the big difference maker there, and I think he's kind of what gets them. And they depends on what number you look at for last week. They didn't cover. They pushed 8 points, maybe eight and a
Yeah.
half, depending on what they were. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a 50-50 on the fence, move on game for
I
us.
think, I mean, the last thing I would just say, with in terms of like leaning to the Lions, um, you know, both of what we're saying can be true too.
Yeah,
Like they could win by a touchdown tomorrow,
yeah,
and they could still celebrate the memes. They can still eat the turkey drums. It's not like they can only do that if they win by 20.
yeah. No, that's true. Yeah,
A win is a win, and I think a hard fought win against a streaking Lions team, whether it's by 3 points, 7 points, can still very much be celebrated in the same way.
yeah,
But I think just given the way both teams have been playing, yeah, yeah, I like the chances of the Lions to stay within striking distance and cover. I'm not putting money on the money line, but yeah. All right, should we move to the next game and
yeah.
keep it going? All right, we got the Cowboys and Giants, second game of the day. Cowboys at home, they're laying 9.5. Couple things to note: Dallas 1-10 against the spread on Thanksgiving in their last 11. Dak is 4-8 on short rest, 1-4 on Thanksgiving against the spread. Um, Obviously, both teams coming off very different results last week. Cowboys with a huge blowout win over 8-1 Vikings. and then the Giants we just talked about, blown out at home against the Lions. So, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, so you actually covered most of the notes I had. I had the Thanksgiving spread for Cowboys. And then I talked about the Cowboys coming off that blowout, and then the Giants coming off a pretty, I'd say, somewhat surprising and disappointing loss last week at home against Detroit, actually. But um, the Cowboys, they did win earlier in the season as 1.5 point dogs. That was in New York. Um, for all these reasons, I'm actually just going with the Giants. I think it's a huge spread, and I think it's kind of an overreaction a little bit. I mean, I definitely don't think. I think when you're talking about who a Super Bowl contender is, I'd much rather put my money on the Cowboys. But I don't think that there's a 10-point gap between these two teams. I don't know
Yeah,
if there's like some significant injury that I'm missing or what, but I think as long as Saquon Barkley's in that lineup, it doesn't really matter to me.
I think
Um,
the one, I mean, the one thing that does, and this was part of my notes, and I think actually one of the reasons that I'm actually leaning to the Cowboys on this
mhm.
is the Wandale Robinson torn ACL. Um, my view on that, like you might look at that and say, like, what, I mean, it's Wandale Robinson. I mean, they were still trying to figure out how to get him involved in the offense, but I think he was a very dynamic threat that they had, and they were trying to get more incorporated into the offense. And now you lose him, and outside of Darius Slayton in the passing game, what do they have?
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree with that, but at the same point, Wanda wasn't playing at all. He was out for pretty much the first month and a half of the season.
yeah,
And,
but
and then the
he's been
Giants, they were still
inconsistent.
winning games. They were still playing well then as well.
But they had other options that have also gotten injured. And so I think they were getting him back at a good time where like they kind of needed him.
Yeah.
Um, like they lost who was it? Sterling, Sterling Shepard went down with another ACL. And that happened while Wandale was out. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think my a couple things I was looking at is just like, I feel like the Cowboys defense now has the ability to like fully lock in on Saquon and shut that down. And I think with that linebacking group, with that front push, like this also just seems like a classic game. And it's a very similar read I'm going to have in the next game we'll talk about of just, is this going to be like old school Danny Dimes where he's just going to be under pressure all day and that Dallas defense is going to eat him up? And then I think the way that their offense is really starting to trend with the dual threat of Pollard and Zeke, how they're incorporating both, getting Pollard more involved. I think it's opening up the passing game above and beyond those two guys. Obviously, CD Lamb's a big threat. Dalton Schultz. Um, I really love the way that the Cowboys are trending. And I just worry that for the Giants, like, yes, they've been a big success story, especially against the spread so far. But I feel like the injuries, the injuries are starting to pile up. And it's been a nice story so far. I think they're moving in the right direction, but this just starts to feel like a turning point in their season where they're going to level off. The Cowboys are going to continue to ascend. And my read on this game is that this is a bit of a like a separation point for these two teams where the Cowboys continue in the right direction. The Giants kind of level off, and I do like the Cowboys in a big. I like them to cover.
Yeah. For what it's worth, 56% of the bets are on the Giants, 76% of the money is on the Giants as well.
Mhm.
My argument is just like I just don't really think the line makes sense. Like you can think that the Cowboys are going to blow them out and win by more than 10 and all that. I just don't, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the spread has to be that, right? The Cowboys, they covered or they won by 40 points last week, and I think it was like a 2-3 point spread, right?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it just doesn't make these are two teams with the same record. The Giants have been very good against the spread this year. And like I said, yeah, like I do agree that Wandale was very important for their offense, and he could have been something that they built around for the rest of the year. But I think when you're actually just looking at the success that they've had this season, it really hasn't relied on Wandale at all.
Mhm.
He's only had 2 games this season where he's gone above 4 targets, and he also missed, like I said, the first month of the season, really, first 5 weeks. Um, so I mean, it could very well end with a Cowboys blowout. But when I just looked at this at first, I was like, I just don't really see where we're getting that. I think that Jones, he is starting to, he's still an average quarterback. And, I don't think that it's all of a sudden we're seeing, oh, he got the weapons and now he can, become an elite star or anything like that. But I do think that he's a lot better than he got credit for coming into the season, with how he didn't get his fifth year option picked up. So he is going to be a free agent this year. Um, Yeah, I just think that this Giants defense, they've been pretty solid, and I do agree with like the Cowboys, they're playing well, but these are also these spots where we just always see the Cowboys flop. Like we always see the Cowboys build this momentum, and everybody starts viewing them as a legit contender, and they always flop in these spots. So, with the spread just sticking out to me like that, and then just what we've always seen from Dak and the Cowboys and everything like that, I never trust them to actually build on this momentum and actually do something with it. So I always look for them to flop here too. But I just thought it was too big of a spread, two division rivals. I could see this game going under, and that's never favorable for a big spread to begin with.
No.
So that's why I lean the Giants here.
All right. Let's talk the third game and then keep rolling, see if there are
Yeah.
any other spots, and then come back. I mean, I think we're going to be in agreement on this one. So we got the Patriots and the Vikings. Last game of the slate. Pats getting 2.5. Vikings obviously coming off that big blowout loss. The Patriots coming off that interesting win against the Jets. But I think the thing you and I were texting about that both of us really loved is the fact that Belichick admitted he started prepping for this game last week, which seemed to indicate he just really wasn't all that worried about Zach Wilson and the Jets. So it seems like he's gotten a jump on prep for this game.
Yeah, this was just a win that I kind of had circled before the year, right? When you look at the schedule and you go down the list and you say like, oh, that could be a win, that could be a loss, that type of thing. The old Francesa reading the Yankee schedule or something. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of I like us against the Vikings in this spot. I'm pretty sure we beat them the last time we played. I actually don't remember off the top of my head, but I always all I remember from that game was Belichick on the field screaming at Adam Thielen, them John back and forth. Um, I was joking around earlier this week. It's a revenge game for Belichick. This is where they lost on the Philly special, that type of thing. I do like that the Pats were looking ahead here. Kevin O'Connell, he's a former Patriots quarterback. He used to back up Tom Brady, so there is a little bit of a relationship there with Belichick as well. But yeah, this is just Kirk in prime time. The Vikings are starting to look like a little fraudulent. Maybe they're not really just gonna cruise to 13, 14 wins or something. Maybe they are going to end up with 11, 12 and not be as strong going into the postseason as we were thinking earlier in the year. But I like the Pats. I think the Pats they found a way to get things rolling the last few years in the middle of the season. I think that this is it again. Mac Jones did play very well last week. He didn't have the touchdown, and that's really been the reason because I think people really associate his fantasy value with his real life value. So he's not getting these big fantasy points. He's not a great fantasy quarterback, doesn't get these touchdowns or anything, but he was moving the ball last week. And everyone's giving Zach Wilson the excuse. It was a windy day in New England. It was the same windy day for Mac Jones. He completed 85% of his passes, threw like 26 passes or something, 240 yards. So he was able to move the ball. And I like them to just come in here, and I think this defense is really just going to keep it, just stay locked in, and they'll be able to, manage Justin Jefferson, or maybe it's one of those where you just let him go off and you focus on stopping everybody else and that type of thing. But I like the Pats here a lot.
Sorry, I was still on mute.
Yeah.
Uh, I was I was also just kind of looking at this game having a very similar, maybe not as much of a blowout as the Cowboys game, but I just the pressure that the Cowboys got on Cousins, and the way that they were just able to dominate on the defensive side of the ball and just create opportunities for the offense. I just feel like that Patriots defense is going to be able to do a very similar thing. I do think the Vikings offense and Cousins in particular is just going to have a hard time withstanding that pressure. That Patriots secondary is very good. So again, to your point, like even if they can contain Justin Jefferson, and at least mitigate him having like, an overly explosive day. I just really like the odds of the Patriots here. I do love this pick.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's roll with it and let's keep it
Yeah.
moving.
I mean, we haven't picked the Pats much this year, so why not,
No, no,
have
we
something
haven't.
to cheer for Thanksgiving
Well,
night?
that's always been like a lock for us on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
All right, next game we got the Ravens and the Jaguars. Ravens laying 4. They're coming off a really odd, kind of hard fought win over the Panthers. And then the Jags are coming off the bye.
Yeah, so we've liked to bet against or bet on the Ravens when they're playing against bad teams. I don't necessarily think the Jags fit into the bad team category here. More commentary on last week. I mean, they were right there, we were really just a touchdown away from a cover. Or they just got one more touchdown on the day.
Yep.
That would have been, huge for us. But the Panthers, they are a tough defense. We'll get to them in a second, anyways. Um, but I think what we just saw is that the Ravens don't have that firepower, right? When we bet on the Ravens against these bad teams before, it's because they go out and they blow these teams out. Lamar Jackson's thrown for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then running for another one and another 75 yards on the ground, that type of thing. And they're not doing that this year. And Mark Andrews came back and he was coming off the injury, but they really don't have any receivers anymore. I
They
think
don't have playmakers. They don't have playmakers. I mean,
Yeah, it's
Hollywood
like
Brown's.
I'd argue that their second best receiver is Isaiah Likely, the rookie tight
Yeah,
end,
I
and they
agree.
don't have they don't have that J.K. Dobbins rookie that they were expecting, and they're relying on Kenyon Drake, who is just he's very inconsistent. That's why he's always in this backup role, right? Because he can pop off, but he's not that everyday playmaker that you can rely on.
Yeah.
The Jags, they're off a bye. I do worry that this is one of those, if we were to fade the Ravens, we're zigging when they're zagging. And it's just, sometimes there are those teams where you're always trying to chase their spread and, you're always just on the wrong side every week and you can't get in sync with them. But, and it does worry me a little bit with the Jags. I like them off the bye. I think that this is a game that they can come and actually win outright. And it's just a little bit of a surprise loss for the Ravens. But with it being such a close spread, I do worry about the Jags in one score games. They don't win those.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's a little concerning, but I do like them coming off the bye. They've had time to really prepare for this, and I like them as outright winners in 4-point dogs.
Yeah, I lean Jags. I don't love it. But it's definitely where I'm leaning. I mean, I think, to what we were just talking about, like just the Ravens offense and the lack of explosiveness that we've seen in the past, I think it just makes them a more vulnerable team. I think their defense is fine. They were going up against a piss poor offense last week, so I think it allowed their defense to really stand out. But this is a Jaguars team that also, like, they have more weapons. They have been playing better offensively. I think they are a bigger threat. And I think they can put some points up. But again, I think just like they don't yet have like that ability to close, even if we're talking about a spread line. They're still lacking kind of that killer instinct a little bit. I mean, even like the fail to cover on the 9.5 against the Chiefs was disappointing, but it was like self-inflicted wounds that I expect from a team, I guess, that's kind of at this part of their
Yeah, I
journey.
mean, because that's if they just cleaned it up, they really could have
They
won
were in
out.
that, yeah, they were in that game, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, they
totally.
forced multiple turnovers
Yeah,
against a team that doesn't
yeah.
do that.
But this is a team that's like they're not there yet. They're heading in the right direction. They're not there yet. Maybe next year it's the year after that, like we really start to see them close on these games if they can keep building. But I think that's the one reason I don't love the pick,
Yeah, like because yeah, like I said, I like them to win outright, and I feel like it's going to be a game that's close the whole way.
Yeah.
But I just when it comes to because I've been thinking about this too, is like sometimes I pick a spread and it's like, well, you pick the spread because you wanted to take something. But when you really break down like what your analysis was, it's like, you were betting on a team that you think could compete with the spread. Where if you're especially when you're betting on underdogs, like I like taking underdogs when I really feel like they can win outright. Because if they're going to win outright, then they're obviously going to cover the spread. And even if they fall short, then you're probably still going to be all right on the spread. But like I said, when it comes to the Jags and these one score games, I could truly see it being Jags are up 3 with 2 minutes left. The
Yeah.
Ravens score a touchdown, and then they lose by 4, and then we just push. And we were probably
Yeah.
winning and covering the whole game, and then we just lose it just like that. And I could totally see that happening. And with it being a what I think will be a close back and forth game, then I think 4 is just a little risky.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, it's a lean. Next game. We got Broncos and Panthers in Carolina. Broncos coming off that brutal loss to the Raiders, and the Panthers, Sam Darnold at quarterback. He's back. They're also teetering on history with the lowest point total in the last decade. Right now it's at 36.5. Lowest in the last 10 years was the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game from 2019, which actually over-under was 35. Final score was 28-10. So,
I like the
um,
Panthers a lot here, actually. I've felt like I've had a good feel for the Broncos the whole season. I don't feel like that connection's as strong as it has been in weeks past because I've just stopped caring, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the Broncos, I mean, they're bad. They're outright bad. The offense cannot move the ball. Russell Wilson is not he's not looking like he's finding it at all. Like there's no chemistry with his receivers. I don't think he's very well liked, and I think that's why there's a lack of chemistry.
Yeah.
And it also just like maybe it's because they just think it's going to be such a low scoring game that you can only make the spread so big. I can't believe Russell Wilson's 2.5 point favorite against Sam Darnold. That doesn't make sense to me. That makes me want to take Carolina because Carolina, they've been playing these teams tough, and I've liked Carolina. I've kind of been tooting their horn ever since Steve Wilkes took over, and I've been saying that I think he was very underrated based on his resume coming from Arizona. I think people were just kind of skimming through that and not really reading between the lines on some of the reasons he got fired, things like that. I thought he's an underrated coach, and he's a defensive mind. And the Broncos, they're a defensive team. I think this could be a defensive slugfest. I also don't think Sam Darnold's that bad, especially on a week where Zach Wilson's getting benched. I tweeted out that take last night where Darnold was a better Jets quarterback than Zach Wilson has been. And I think that's a pretty objective statement at this point. You can look at the stats, you can look at the record. Darnold was way better, and he had way, way, way worse weapons, not just on offense, but he also had a worse defense backing him up. The Jets, they have a very good team right now, and their quarterback they're really winning despite their quarterback. So it kind of makes you look back, and especially in a year where Geno Smith's had a resurgence as well, you say, maybe we did give up on this guy too early. I don't think that Darnold is suddenly a hidden superstar or something, but I think people maybe look at Darnold and say he got ran out of New York and then he went down here and he lost his job to PJ Walker and then Baker Mayfield and all that stuff. And I think that people are maybe overrating how bad he is. I think he's just a totally average quarterback. And I think this could be a very, good game. And I think the Panthers could win this one as well. I mean, we've seen the Panthers be a very competitive team, and there's no reason to believe that the Broncos are just gonna, continue to figure it out. Maybe it falls into the boat of the Jags game as well, or maybe it's too close for comfort to take, and maybe we have other spreads that we like. But I like the Panthers to win outright here as dogs.
Where's the money on this game?
54% of the bets are on Carolina, 72% of the money are on Carolina.
Jesus. I mean, maybe we do just kind of follow that trend.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing too where when Carolina is able to keep teams under 17 points, they find ways to win. I think that most of their wins have come by keeping teams under 17 points. And it's one of those where it's like, well, that makes sense because if they're not scoring, then that doesn't require them to score as much. But I think Darnold can do fine in this offense. I don't think that this is I don't really know what people are saying about the offense, but I just feel like, your knee jerk reaction is, oh, Darnold stinks, all that stuff. I think he's going to do a fine job. And I think that, he could be able to put up some points. Him, DJ Moore, Deontay Foreman's been running the ball well. So I think the Panthers are sneaky here.
Yeah. I mean, I think this also just feels like it's a true, like, just fade Russell Wilson and the Broncos at this point. I mean, this like even like the release of Melvin Gordon. Like that, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not paying close enough attention. I know he had a problem with fumbles, but like that's kind of stunning to me.
Yeah, they were sellers at the deadline. They're getting rid of a veteran running back, and
Yeah, and so like now all of a sudden your lead back is Latavius Murray, who I think the Saints picked up off a trash heap earlier this year when they went to London. And then like 1 week after like filling in for, Alvin Kamara, who is a surprise scratch, all of a sudden he gets waived and then he gets picked up by the Broncos and he's just kind of been like stashed in there. I mean, there's like they've got no weapons, there's nothing on offense, as you said, there's no chemistry. Like the stories just get worse and worse for Russ. So if anything, it just feels like just continue to fade the Broncos at this point because I don't see how a team that came in with such high expectations, who's now what 3-7, like they're out of it, they're done.
yeah.
Like I just don't see how they pull themselves out of it.
And Wilson typically gets worse as the season goes on. That's always been his thing. He's always the let Russ cook, MVP Russ, all
Yeah,
that stuff at the beginning of the season, putting up 20, 30, 40 fantasy points in games and stuff like that. And then you look back, you're like, wait, why was he QB8? I thought he
yeah,
was, the best quarterback or something.
yeah,
And then you realize it's because he was getting 10 to 15 points every game for the last month and a half. So,
yeah, yeah.
historically he gets worse as the season goes on. So
All right, let's keep rolling. Commanders and Falcons next up. Commanders laying 4.5. Falcons. lost Kyle Pitts, which is kind of significant. And then the Commanders have they've decided to go with Heineke the rest of the way. He is their starter.
Yeah, I would emphasize the kind of and the kind of significant just because I don't I think you could really put anybody in that passing game and kind of have the same results. I know that London and Pitts are crazy talented, but they're just not being utilized like that. It's very scheme heavy right now. They're relying on the run, stuff like that. These are two teams that are really surprising, where they're at this point in the season. I think these are teams that everybody kind of expected to be way underperforming. The Falcons, being way more of a top 5, top 10 pick, and then the Commanders not really not I don't know. I mean, they're put together a lot of wins lately, and I think that committing to Heineke was the right choice for sure. I'm kind of on the fence here. I don't know if you have a strong lean. Chase Young, it sounds like he is going to be back. He is going to be playing. I think that could be a huge boost for a team that's kind of gaining this type of momentum. I definitely think the Falcons they're sticking around. I thought that last week would have been a loss, and they'd continue to fade into obscurity when it came to the NFC South race. They are sticking around a little bit. Not making it easy for the Bucs to just take the division, but yeah, I mean, I could kind of be swayed into either way here. I don't know if you have a strong feeling or if it's just pass because we're on the fence.
I mean, I think I lean Commanders just with the momentum of Heineke and the way he's playing, and I think just making the announcement like this is the path we're going. And if I had to guess, like nobody in that locker room was upset except for Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think the ability to just make that move and move on. And again, I mean, they're coming off, the big win over the Eagles, the win last, like they're rolling. Like it's, I don't know. I mean, to your point, like, the Falcons, like, I know we were on the Bears last week. They kind of grinded one out. They're hanging around. But I do lean Washington here, but I don't think it's necessarily like it's not like a love.
Yeah, the sharp money's on Washington too. That's definitely where I lean. I could definitely use the Commanders' loss because I have the under on their win total.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think gun to my head, I'd probably go Washington, but it's not a strong feel, and it doesn't sound like it is for you either.
All right. Bucks and Browns next up. Bucks laying 3.5. They're coming off the bye. Browns, obviously coming off the loss against Buffalo last week, which we talked about in Detroit. Any thoughts here?
I say we just keep riding single Tom. We were fading him when we had the whole voodoo theory going, and then as soon as the divorce became official, it seems like he's had some type of weight lifted off his shoulders, and it hasn't necessarily been pretty, but they're
Yeah.
getting the wins, they're covering that type of thing. So, it's Brady versus Brissett. I just feel like Brady should dominate that matchup. The Wolf Pack, their brothers from back in the day, that type of thing. But and then also just Tom Brady and the Bucs off a bye. So 3.5
Yep.
points. I think that this could be a touchdown or more win. So give me the Bucs here.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like the idea of just, we've been all about kind of riding trends that we've seen and felt good about. And I think even in instances where we didn't do it, like, not betting on the Titans one week and being like, why didn't we?
Yeah.
Like it's like, we have a theory.
To be
Let's just
fair, I think that was the Malik Willis week. So
it was, but at the
yeah,
same
I would.
time, like, after we were just kicking ourselves a little bit
Yeah,
of like, it's Mike Vrabel. Like he just
yeah,
gets him up. We like that team. But I think yeah, I like them off a bye. Again, like I always just say with this team too, it's like the rest I think helps. They've got some older guys, they've got some guys with injuries. So like, being able to rest up and
yeah.
kind
Godwin, he's been dealing with the leg and the ACL from the offseason. So he's been
of,
definitely getting stronger as the season goes on. And a guy like him loves to have a late bye like this because of that, right? He's finally getting it going. Now he can get rested a little bit and then get right back to it. Mike Evans, I know he was getting banged up a little bit, especially in that Rams game. So
and
good to get
I'm
them back. Julio Jones, week of rest. I'm assuming that he'll be healthy for this too. So they should be full strength. I think that they can come out and they can really blow the doors off the Browns here.
I'm interested to see too how Rashad White, continues to get incorporated into
Yeah.
that.
And then they said they're going to ride the hot hand. And I know that that's kind of a blanket coach term, that type of thing. But I think that that's really what the Bucs should do because Lenny can still play. I mean, he definitely, there were the reports of him coming in overweight, that type of thing. But,
Yeah,
he's shown that he can still have it in different games. And maybe it's a little more matchup dependent for him.
yeah,
But, Rashad White's been playing well. I think that they have way more of a two-headed attack. And,
yeah,
that's dangerous.
yeah. All right. Next up, we get the Bengals and the Titans. Bengals laying 1.5. Sounds like Jamar Chase is going to play, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
I continue to ride the Titans here. I mean, I think last week was huge for them. That was just a big win, right? That was in Lambeau, a little bit of snow before the game, that type of thing. And, they really seem to get the offense going. Traylon Burks is now, he's back. I've been really waiting for this all season just because for dynasty purposes, he's a rookie that I really liked. I've just been big on him since the draft. Um, I think this team's just going to continue to click. And, I know at the Bengals and especially with Jamar Chase in, I think that they've been getting stronger as the season goes on. I think you can say a lot of the same things about their team, but I just like continuing to ride the Titans. I think Mike Vrabel's a much better coach than Zach Taylor. I think that a lot of their wins are more, you know, despite their coaching. I don't think Zach Taylor is a great coach. I think that they just went on this miracle run last year. And, I think that they're way more of a middle team than they were an elite team, like we were saying at the beginning of the year. They did bounce back more. I didn't think that they were going to get right based off how they started earlier in the year. I'd say that they proved me wrong on that. But, give me the Titans in the coaching matchup. I think this offense is still underrated. I think that Todd Downing getting the DUI could actually be better for the team. I don't think he's a very good offensive mind.
yeah,
I think that he's actually been holding them back a little bit. So maybe getting some new eyes on the offensive reports this week could actually help freshen them up a little bit. But I like
yeah,
I like how they're looking with Traylon Burks. I think the addition of him in this offense is going to be huge for them. And Derrick Henry always gets stronger as the season goes on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I think too. Like, I mean, obviously the Bengals had a dominant performance against the Panthers a couple weeks ago, but you look at like that Steelers matchup last week. I mean, they kind of put that game away in the fourth, but I mean, they were trailing in that second
Yeah.
half at one, and it's like we were on the Steelers side, obviously, so it was frustrating not to get that cover. But like the fact that they were only 4.5 point favorites against the Steelers, to me says something because I think as much as the Steelers fight and as tough as they are, and they were getting TJ Watt back, like it's still a team that's like trying to find their identity with a rookie quarterback and a lot of questions on offense. Um, so the fact that they struggled to kind of pull away in that game to me too, like, just indicates to me like good football team, but they're going up against a really good football team. And I think a team that's, they're going to play hard. They're getting some pieces back. And obviously like the Derrick Henry thing, like, they can control this game on the ground and maybe keep that Cincinnati offense off the field by just controlling the clock and controlling the pace of the game with Henry.
Yeah.
Uh, and obviously now with Treylon Burks, like could potentially set up some big plays. So, again, I think going back to trends and teams that we like, just continuing to ride those hands. I like the Titans.
Yeah, and I think that Jamar Chase addition could be a little overrated here. I don't even know how much he's been practicing this week.
I
He
mean,
could just be showing up and playing.
he practiced
Um,
today, but it's like, is he going to be limited? Is he going to be a decoy? Like,
yeah,
is this going to be a thing where, like, like Mike Williams last week, he makes a catch and then all of a sudden he's questionable and then he doesn't come back in? Like, we don't know how much of an impact he's going to have.
yeah.
So, anyway, all right, next game, Dolphins laying 13.5 against the Texans. Texans making a QB change. We got Kyle Allen back in the mix. I don't know. Kyle Allen at QB. I mean, when you're going from Davis Mills to Kyle Allen, that's a problem. I know we've loved the Dolphins. It is a big number, which does worry me a little bit. I don't know. What do you think on this game?
Yeah, I mean the Dolphins they've been, like we were saying the other week, when they do cover, it still has been close, and even when they're not covering, it's still close. They do tend to play right around that spread. I think it's, maybe it's one of those where Kyle Allen, he's not as bad as people think. Like I know that he's stepped in certain spots over the past couple of years, and I don't know how he's fared against the spread, but I think he's been surprisingly good, right? He was doing that in Carolina, he was doing that in Washington, I believe, right? He was a Ron Rivera guy. So maybe it's actually not the worst thing for the Texans offense. I do think the Dolphins probably do kill them. The Texans are just a very bad team. I think this could also just be a move where, all right, we're just committing to the tank, because I don't really see any reason to bench Davis Mills, right? You're benching Zach Wilson because you have a good team and your quarterback's holding you back. I don't think Davis Mills was necessarily, you know, the reason that they were losing these games. I think that he was actually playing all right with the talent around him. I know Collins is good and Cooks is good, and They're running Pierce is good, but that's a bad offensive line. That's a bad defense. So if I were to take a side, I'd still go the Dolphins here, but I don't love it at the big spread and with how the Dolphins are, not killing these spreads.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move to the next game because I got to I'm
Yeah.
running out. All right, Jets and Bears, Mike White at QB. Justin Fields also dealing with an injury. Sounds like separated shoulder, but maybe some torn tendons in there. Um, I I just I kind of had this as a pass. We've kind of rode with the Bears a little bit, and I know we've been eyeing Fields. I think the story on him, the way you've talked about it this year, is he's he's great for fantasy, but like he doesn't
They're
win.
not getting the wins, and it happened last week again.
Yep, it did. It did. And I don't know what Mike White means for this offense. Like I know he came in, was it a couple years ago or last year against the Bengals and stunned them. But then I feel like that kind of hype train ran out pretty quick. But I don't know, this just feels like an ugly game that I'd rather pass on.
Yeah, I mean, I'd lead the Jets here. I believe I don't even know who the backup is in Chicago, anyways. But yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, it's maybe a little bit of a boost. I know Elijah Moore played really well with Mike White last year, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a boost they're looking for. But maybe next year is when they really address the quarterback, go get Jimmy G or something. So we could pass on this.
Okay. Seahawks and Raiders. Seahawks laying 3.5. They're coming off a bye, right?
Yes.
Uh, they were in that Germany game against the Bucs. Raiders coming off that win. Um, I don't know. This was a pass for me. I feel like I'm just kind of out on the Raiders. I feel like when I like them, I'm wrong. When I don't like them, I'm wrong. I just can't really read this team, and I'm not really sure how to read this game.
Yeah, I was leaning Seahawks. I think that it's the Raiders. They got to get their wins every once in a while. I think this is where they just go right back to losing. Give me Pete Carroll in the coaching matchup. They're coming off the bye. Geno's having that big resurgence. Kenneth Walker, all that stuff. So I did like the Seahawks a bit here, but if you just want to pass because of the whole Raiders thing, then definitely understood.
Yeah, I mean, were they a top five for you?
No, not if they were, they would have been 5.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Chargers, Cardinals. Chargers laying 4.5. Um, one interesting thing headline that I saw popped up today. I'm not sure how much this maybe starts to seep in, but like, I mean, obviously the Cardinals, like they didn't have Kyler Murray last week. They haven't had him for the last couple weeks. I don't know if he's going to play
I
this
think
week.
he's back.
He's back, but and they might be getting Hollywood Brown back, but there's also
Pitch count, they
now
said.
there's also now talk of it sounds like Sean Payton is he's actually eyeing the head coaching positions for both of these teams,
Yeah.
which is interesting to me, which like I don't feel like that's something that he would just necessarily come out if like there weren't rumblings with both. I mean, obviously we've said what we've said about Brennan Staley, but like he's in a bad place down there. I know this team's had some injuries, but like that record is unacceptable.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This was a pass for me. Just um, again, I think like the Chargers. I have a hard time reading them, and as much as I want to fade the Cardinals, I also just they're getting some weapons back, and they just feel like a team that can jump out of nowhere and surprise you.
Yeah,
So
I lean the Cardinals for that reason. I think that, we've been kind of waiting to see them with a full roster this year with Hollywood and with DeAndre Hopkins back. Even if Hollywood's on a pitch count, I still think that he could break loose for a big touchdown, Kyler back. And then for all the reasons that I've liked to fade the Chargers for this whole season, I lean the Cardinals, but again, it wasn't necessarily a love.
yeah. All right. Let's see. Are there any other games in here that you really like and want to talk about? We do have 5. We've got the Pats, we've got the Panthers, we've got the Commanders, the Bucs, and the Titans. Um, is there anything in here that you really, really like?
So that one more time, Pats, Panthers, Bucks. You say Commanders?
Yes.
Okay,
Uh,
we're Titans. I mean, I like the Steelers plus 2.5 at the Colts.
okay.
Um, Maybe it's worth looking at the Chiefs, that big spread, just to blow out Bryce Perkins.
Yep.
Um,
I was looking at that too. I mean, I
yeah, and
think
then the 2 other games, Packers, Eagles, Niners, Saints. I don't know. If anything, I'd kind of lean the Packers, kind of like the reason that you were saying last week about the Colts. If they are going to beat them, they do have the tools, but at the same time, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon have been playing great. I
Yeah.
could see that actually being a bit of a stunning win. I could actually see the Packers surprising the Eagles and just winning outright. Especially everybody's looking at the Eagles with black helmets, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that could be a surprise one in prime time. We could just
Yeah.
stay off that. I might just take that money line for fun, anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
I like that Chiefs pick. I mean, that new quarterback is taking the first team reps. That team's just in a bad place. I mean, I don't know. Like, are they like, do they just start tanking at this point? I mean, what do they
Yeah,
do?
like I think it's like one of those where maybe there just doesn't have to be much analysis that goes into it. I mean, it is always, always, always scary spread that big. Who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe the Rams defense just does something and shows up and is able to smother it. And then, but at the same time, I could see this being, I mean, are the Chiefs not going to score 20 points?
I mean,
And then I mean, what is that Rams offense going to do, right?
I don't think anything. I mean,
Yeah.
that now they're just leaning into Cam Akers and what is it, Kyron Williams, but like even still, like I mean, Cam Akers still doesn't look explosive,
Yeah. I
and
mean, hey, maybe they come out and maybe it's like, maybe it's like when the Dolphins surprised the Pats with the Wildcat or something.
yeah.
Maybe they just come out, they run the triple option with Parkins and all that. But I mean, maybe it should just be an auto bet.
Is there a game? Do we like that the Chiefs better than one of the other options we had? Do we
If we were
like
to replace it, I'd probably want to go with the Commanders just because I could see that being
a close 3 point
that's
game?
the one that I like the least, just because we've seen the Falcons have these random ass games where they just pop off and
Yeah. Okay.
um,
All right. Let's go. So we'll go Chiefs, Titans, Bucks, Panthers, and Patriots.
cool.
Cool. All right. I'll get these in while I'm on the road. Because we got 2 hours to get them in. So, all right.
All
Excellent.
right.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right, I'll see it.